Good morning. So we will continue discussing New Hollywood period, and we have been talking about New Hollywood period for quite a while. Easy Rider, Dennis Hopper, and several other people of that era. We also talked about the BBS, Schneider, um, Bob Rafelson, and Steve Blommer, and what role did they play in bringing about a cinematic revolution. We also talked about certain socio-political, cultural happenings of that period, and what role did those factors play on shaping the cinema of that particular period. We were talking about Bonnie and Clyde and A Hard Day's Night. So I am just helping you to revise what we have been doing all this while. Today's key concepts would be first wave of cinema, that is Hollywood directors. So we have already talked about the first wave. Today we will discuss two major filmmakers of the first wave, Hal Ashby and William Friedkin, and then we will move on to the second wave of directors. So first wave included Francis Ford Coppola as well, Warren Beatty, Arthur Penn. We have done Bonnie and Clyde. We have at least understood what it was all about. And key texts would be Shampoo, directed by Hal Ashby, The French Connection and The Exorcist, both directed by Bill Friedkin, Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown by Roman Polanski. Good. Socio-cultural concept that we will be looking at, the music scenario. So Rolling Stones, Hell's Angels, and Charles Manson, who was a serial killer, a dreaded serial killer, and we know what his place is. If you don't know much about Charles Manson or about any of these people, please look them up. Okay, so we just watched a clipping of Martin Scorsese's first major success. Of course, first movie was Who Is That Knocking at My Door, but Mean Street brought him into limelight. So the scene that you just watched, how does that fit into that entire scene of New Hollywood period?
You can see use of handheld camera.
Exactly, that's very good. Handheld lightweight camera.
The sound, the car in the background and the sound of the traffic.
Cities.
Real life, yeah.
Cities.
So as Harvey Keitel moves towards the window, and it's a very stream of consciousness kind of dialogue, you know, very internal kind of monologue. He's thinking to himself, thinking something is happening in his mind, there is some kind of a conflict, some kind of anxieties which he shares with us. So very stream of consciousness, very interior. So that's what Scorsese meant by making personal films, very psychological and psychologically driven personal films. Okay, so you can hear the street sound. Yeah, it's set in New York. What else?
The picture is not very finished. Like
It's not a very polished look. Yeah, the titles are not very polished, but they give an impression of, give me the word, and not exactly documentary. It's like exactly home video look, and it's deliberately done so. The home video look is deliberately given so that you give the impression that it's a very personal picture. And then Harvey Keitel going through the motions. What is he doing? It's somebody's baptism. So Martin Scorsese again taking you back to his very Italian American kind of background, that see, this is the way I grew up. So Harvey Keitel is nothing but his own persona. Okay, Harvey Keitel channels Martin Scorsese at several levels. Yeah, he is. In fact, if you look at him, he is a Scorsese. Whereas Bob De Niro, who plays Johnny Boy, he is a complete opposite of Harvey Keitel. Have you watched the movie? You know the movie? We did screen it the other day. So Bob De Niro is something that he would like to be. Okay, he is aggressive, he is impulsive, he can throw himself in a fight. Whereas Scorsese always ran away from fights. Why? Why was that? He was very short to begin with. He was also a sickly child. He grew up in a very strong Catholic Italian American background household, and where the emphasis was always on following certain code of conduct, and the neighborhood was vastly criminal. So he had grown up among guns and knives people, but inside people were extremely religious. So there were no criminals in his family, but he had grown up. His friends were all from that kind of background. His parents, on the other hand, were deeply religious, and they wanted him to become a man of the cloth. But somehow, because he was an asthmatic child, most of the time he was restricted at home. He was not allowed to play too much. He was always seen with a pump, inhaler and all. So he grew like most lonely kids. He developed a fascination for the movies, and then he started watching them. He didn't come from a very educated background. There was no such cultural scene at home that would introduce him to the best of world cinema. He would just go to the neighborhood theater. He attended NYU. So that generation, that second generation of filmmakers were film literates. That's what you have to understand, and that showed in their films. Now tell me about this soundtrack. I am extremely interested in the soundtrack of that period, especially in Martin Scorsese. Be My Baby by Ronettes. Okay. Now what kind of soundtrack is that? Give me the word for it. Is it an OST, original soundtrack for this movie? Then what is it? It's a source music. So this is one word, one expression that you have to remember. When you watch a movie, a musical like My Fair Lady, are you aware of that? My Fair Lady? No? Please do watch it. It's classic Hollywood. Classic Hollywood coming to an end. Okay, it's that period where people sing songs in their own voices, and songs are specially composed for that film. The Sound of Music, are you at least aware of the movie? Even if you haven't watched the movie, The Sound of Music. Now people would sing songs. Songs would be composed especially for the film. Okay, the last movie that followed this pattern, a great Hollywood musical which bombed badly, and after that it was the end of Hollywood musicals for a very long time, was Dr. Dolittle, starring Rex Harrison. The other day I got a mail from one of our students that she's acting in a play, Blithe Spirit by Noel Coward, and suddenly I was transported to those days. Blithe Spirit is a very, very interesting, very funny play by Noel Coward, starring Rex Harrison, a very young Rex Harrison, a great British actor who starred in Cleopatra as Caesar. He also starred in My Fair Lady, Professor Higgins. He also starred in Dr. Dolittle, where he would sing songs. Okay, so that's an original soundtrack for a movie. But people like Scorsese, etc., they sourced music. Now there are several instances of source music in Scorsese, particularly in Mean Streets. Taxi Driver has a background score by Bernard Herrmann. You remember that, right? But we don't have songs. In this movie, we have songs. Please, Mr. Postman is another scene. Do you remember when it's played? Ranjit, you have watched the movie quite recently.
I only remember when they played the Rolling Stones soundtrack.
Yeah, tell me why. Okay, so there's a Rolling Stone soundtrack also. Tell me why. When Harvey Keitel enters this very sleazy, shady bar, nightclub, okay, and it's all bathed in reds and golds and whites, the devil's colors. Okay, so he comes from a very Catholic background. Okay, so where everything is bathed in nice colors, and also lights. Okay, very bright lights. But the moment he enters the bar, it's all bathed in blacks and reds. Okay, and then you have standard Scorsese signature shot. Which shot is that? Harvey Keitel entering the nightclub. Yeah, and where is the camera focused? On the subject or on Harvey Keitel's face or something else? At the back of Harvey Keitel's head. So what is Scorsese doing? He is taking us along Harvey Keitel. Okay, what is it? It's a long shot and a very strong, and this you should know. Now you are going to do presentations on key concepts. Point of view shot. And what is point of view shot? We are looking at this world from Harvey Keitel's point of view. Therefore, back of his head. So, Scorsese wants us to see what our actor is seeing. This is important. In Taxi Driver, he takes it to another level. Tight close-ups of Robert De Niro's eyes. Eyes, that means again one way of showing his point of view. And what is his point of view? The world is disgusting. Yeah, someday rains would come and wash the scum away. Famous lines from Taxi Driver. Remember those? Bernard Herrmann's very intriguing music playing in the background. Okay. And when you are giving a tight close-up of the actor's eyes, what are you showing on the other hand? Apart from point of view, the inside of his mind. See, it's not Being John Malkovich came much later, okay, where you are actually taken inside somebody's head. Remember? Please do watch Being John Malkovich. Kaufman brothers made the movie. John Cusack and actually we have John Malkovich, and we are taken inside John Malkovich's head, and there is an opening in his head and people would walk in and walk out. It's a very metaphysical, okay, you don't have to take it literally. You can't jump inside Scorsese's head and come out, but when you show a tight close-up of Bob De Niro's eyes, you are actually being transported inside his head. That's one way of showing that you are looking at this character's psychology. So that's standard Scorsese shot. And then later on he perfected it in The Goodfellas, where there is a long take and the camera just tracks this couple, and while the man wants to show the woman how powerful and how important he is. He's a gangster, that's his life's ambition, to be a gangster. That's all he wanted to be, remember? Okay, that's all in Goodfellas. Our hero wants to be nothing but a gangster. He was fascinated by the glamorous lifestyles of these people, throwing about money, driving in Cadillacs and whatnot. This is, and guns. So he said, this is the life. I mean, who cares about my very lower middle class parents, their hard working ways, but you must be like them. So when he makes it big, so he takes his girl through this passage. It's at the back of the restaurant where the best table is laid out for them, although there are no tables free at that point, but he wants to show off actually, and the camera just tracks them. It's again a point of view shot, and the girl is as awestruck as this man. Okay, so they fit, they complement each other because she is as fascinated by the lifestyle as him. Scorsese's favorite shot, point of view shot. He followed it again in his next movie, The Age of Innocence. There is a scene where Newland Archer, as played by Daniel Day-Lewis, he walks inside a huge ballroom, and its camera again focuses at the back of his head. And by that time, the movie was released in '93. I had watched enough of Martin Scorsese, and I felt, yeah, here it comes again, because that's Martin Scorsese. So we were talking about auteurism, and yeah, so auteurism, directors deliberately tried to develop a personal style. In Mean Streets, one of his very first movies, he tries to develop a deeply personal style by showing the credits in a home video format. He did it again in Raging Bull. That's the only part in the movie which is shot in color. Okay, so look at all these things. You know, there is always a pattern there. Okay, anything else you would like to talk about
like he refers to the church and he says whatever happened in the church is bullshit, but then he goes back to the baptism.
Yeah, you pay for your sins.
Yeah.
Yeah, in streets and not in the church. Okay, no matter what anyone tells you. But then he is like Scorsese, he is a man torn between the mean streets and his deeply Catholic upbringing. So that's Scorsese. That's the way he always remained. Okay, and films offered him a haven to escape these two contradictions, where he can combine the best of two. So see, all his movies are about this resolving a conflict, a dichotomy between religion and crime. Okay, so that's about Mean Streets, and we'll do Scorsese again in detail. We'll take a particular movie from him, by him, and then we'll discuss it later. But then let's look at what was New Hollywood all about. So we have been doing it for quite a while, and let me take you to something that happened on December 8th, 1969, where Rolling Stones were doing a show somewhere near San Francisco, and Mick Jagger famously performed to Sympathy for the Devil. Now this is quite telling. Sympathy for the Devil. Have you watched the?
I watched the documentary. It's called Gimme Shelter.
Exactly. Okay. And we have already talked about the makers of Gimme Shelter, the Maisley brothers. We were talking about they were the people who developed this documentary and handheld lightweight equipment, which were very conducive to making documentaries. And Hell's Angels were invited to augment the security quotient for the Rolling Stones. And they came on their Harley Davidsons, and they would wear brass knuckles and carry their usual accoutrements, that knives and sticks, etc. Sometimes even guns. So a riot broke out, and a young black man was knifed. He was killed. So that was the okay. So all this was caught on film, and as Ranjit was saying, the Maisley brothers made a documentary called Gimme Shelter based on these events. So what are we talking about now? Sympathy for the Devil, and somebody is killed on the spot by Hell's Angels. So what are we talking about? That America was caught in some kind of a cultural revolution. Okay. So therefore this sudden interest in demonic possessions. Okay, I am just giving you the background for some of the great movies which were made, and all movies based on novels. Okay. So the Godfather, of course, it's not a supernatural thriller, but people taken over by something extremely demonic forces, right? Not exactly supernatural. Do you understand me? What I am trying to say? The way Michael Corleone's character, the way his character graph is changed, he's slowly taken over. You know, he's possessed by demonic forces, not necessarily supernatural, but this hunger and obsession for power is also a kind of satanic force. So, in other words, America was ready for creepy tales of demonic possessions, and William Peter Blatty wrote his novel The Exorcist in 1971. Earlier we had Ira Levin's Rosemary's Baby. Okay. So Polanski had already made a movie based on people who are taken over by the demonic forces. But before we go on to do The Exorcist and other works by Friedkin, I just wanted you to get introduced to Hal Ashby. Hal Ashby had already made a movie called Harold and Maude, which was very experimental and avant-garde. Do you remember? We were talking about Harold and Maude. Maude is 80, Harold is 20, and both of them are in love. Okay, so is that a very, very unconventional love story. So Hal Ashby, who started his career as an editor, he made a couple of great movies. The Last Detail, which was an honorable flop, starring Jack Nicholson. Then Shampoo, starring Warren Beatty, Goldie Hawn and Julie Christie. So, Shampoo is also a reworking of a restoration comedy. Restoration period was an important period in the British history, and the theatre of that period was marked by drawing room comedies, the so-called comedy of manners, lifestyle of the rich and famous as we see today. Okay, so drawing room comedies where ladies and gentlemen of that period would act out, you know, their loves and their intrigues, etc. So, Shampoo is partly based on William Wycherley, who was a prominent writer, a playwright of the Restoration period, and his comedy, The Country Wife. Does anyone know what it's all about? What is A Country Wife all about? Wycherley's The Country Wife. What is Shampoo about? See, Wycherley's The Country Wife is all about a gentleman who pretends to be impotent. And why does he want to do that? So that other men don't feel threatened by him. So, a very bold theme, particularly for those periods. I mean, we are looking at Restoration period. Okay? So, yeah, so that's the period we are looking at, and a theme like that. Shampoo is all about a hairdresser played by Warren Beatty. Now, generally, what are hairdressers known for? Of course, they are experts, but in their own craft. But there is also a cliche about hairdressers, that they are, yeah, most of them are gay. Warren Beatty's character plays on this cliche, this stereotype, and spreads a gossip about himself that he is gay. Okay. And then all men, all the Beverly Hill types, you know what is Beverly Hills? Okay, a very posh, very rich area. Okay, and all men entrust their wives with him because they feel, okay, no, yes, what can he do after all? And then he has a string of affairs with everybody's wife. So that's Shampoo. Shampoo was scripted by Robert Towne, and it was a huge smashing success, directed by Hal Ashby. He also directed Coming Home in 1978. Shampoo is considered a classic. Okay, just ignore all these raunchy stuff about it and watch it as a serious piece. It's a comedy, okay, but it does have very strong political subtext about the Nixon era. Okay, so watch the movie. Warren Beatty, after all, was a very political kind of an actor. Now, we were just talking about Sympathy for the Devil, and then William Friedkin, he arrived on the scene. He was born in 1935. He had made a couple of documentaries and art house films, so he was stuck with that image. He is an art filmmaker. Most of the films were huge flops, and while he was making his television shows, he had also done work on a program called the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, or sometimes it's also called Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Okay. So it was a TV show which began in 1965. Success came in the form of The French Connection, starring Gene Hackman. I think we did The French Connection in one of our earlier courses. This was followed by The Exorcist. Then he made a movie called Sorcerer. Sorcerer is based on Henri Clouzot's movie Wages of Fear, a French movie. Remember, we are talking about the new Hollywood directors who were heavily influenced by the Europeans. Yeah, so that influence remained. The Sorcerer was a reworking of Wages of Fear by Clouseau. Later on, he made Rules of Engagement, which is a pretty recent movie, and then Killer Joe, as recent in 2011. But his reputation rests on the French Connection and the Exorcist. So, he was also influenced by French films like Diabolique and Wages of Fear, we have just talked about, both by Clouseau, and Citizen Kane changed the way he perceived films. He said, okay, this is like, James Joyce's Ulysses. It's as important a text as Joyce's Ulysses is to literature. He admired European cinema, and some of his all-time favorite films were Blow Up. We have often been talking about Blow Up by Antonini. A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles picture, Juliet of the Spirits, and La Guerre est finie. So these were his favorite films that went on to influence him deeply. He has been quoted as having said that the plotted film is on the way out. You know what's a plotted film? A movie with a strong plot. The other day we were talking about, does Easy Rider have a strong plot, and we agreed, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. So that's what. So style is more important. Substantial style should take over the plot. That was the idea. Plot was important in classic Hollywood period. So it's no longer of interest to a serious director, a new theater audience, which is who is under 30, and they are largely interested in abstract experience. That's what he believed in. That audiences, the age demography has changed, and they are interested more in abstract experiences rather than give them more concrete, more plotted stories. However, at that period, at that point, he was also seeing the great Howard Hawks. So you people know who Howard Hawks was, right? And he was seeing his daughter Kitty Hawks, who was a model, and they met the great Howard Hawks, and Howard Hawks said that, what kind of movies you people make? They don't make much sense to me. And in my time, there were the good guys and the bad guys, and the good guys would always win, and it brought us a lot of success. Okay, so why don't you people go back to making that kind of cinema? And those words remained with William Friedkin. He said, yes, this is an advice which comes from one of the great authors. So perhaps there is something to it. So later on he said, after condemning the plotted films and all that, he said, American films of the 30s and 40s had clear storyline and strong characters. The new wave of European filmmakers took over, and we all went out and copied Godard and Fellini, forgetting where our roots are. Okay, that means going back to our roots. So how many of you are familiar with the French Connection? Only one or two? Please do watch it. Watch it as your necessary viewing. So the French Connection was a result of all these golden pieces of advice by Howard Hawks, starring Gene Hackman and also Fernando Ray, who is the antagonist. Gene Hackman is the protagonist, and this is a still from the French Connection, where after a famous car chase scene, Gene Hackman shoots down the person who is escaping. So what is the French Connection all about? Okay, this is one of the key texts of the New Hollywood period. So it's a fact-based thriller. It is based on real life events about a drug ring busted up by the NYPD. It's adapted from a novel by Robin Moore. And contrary to what Godard and Fellini's were doing all along, Friedkin is stuck to whatever Howard Hawks advised him to do and followed a linear narrative story. Earlier he had planned it in a non-linear, more experimental style, but then he met Howard Hawks, fortunately, who advised him to follow the classic Hollywood style of making. But it's not classic Hollywood. If you watch it, it has its experimental moments. It's quite avant-garde-ish, but basically followed a traditional, linear, more accessible kind of storyline. Bullet, a movie starring Steve McQueen. Please watch it. Okay, take it down. Which was released a few years earlier. It has one of the most breathtaking car chase sequences. A very lengthy, very devilishly shot scene. Steve McQueen on a chase. And that movie, that scene was one of the contributing factors in making Bullet such a smash hit. And the producers of the French Connection insisted that since you are making a cop drama, you know, there is a subgenre of action adventure movies, the cop drama. So Friedkin was advised by the producers to insert a scene. It's like today our filmmakers are advised to insert an item number. If you have Kareena Kapoor or Katrina Kaif doing something, you know, an item number in the middle of a very serious film, a very gloomy film like Agnipath, okay, then the chances of success automatically increase. So let's have a car chase sequence in the French Connection, and then let's see. So the French, if you Google it, if you look it up and just type in top 10 car chase sequences of all time, Bullet is number 1, followed by the French Connection. Okay, so it became very popular, and of course the French Connection was his homage to the French masters who he admired so much. Fernando Ray, as we were just talking about, actor, was the Frog. The Frog is the code name given to these drug dealers, to these European drug dealers by the NYPD cops. Okay, does he mean anything to you? Have you watched him in any of his European films? He was a favorite of Buñuel. He appeared in many of his films. Fernando Ray. The car chase scene, which was actually shot on locations, it was not something that was shot on the sets or a studio thing, but it was a real scene shot on real locations. And William Friedkin was recently, you know, there is a documentary where William Friedkin takes you again to a walking tour of those, exactly those areas, those locations where this scene was shot. Okay, so Friedkin had seen Z. Z is also R. Shanghai. Okay, R. Shanghai, Dibakar Banerjee's great movie Shanghai is also based on Z. It's basically a 1966 novel by Vasilikos, and which was filmed by Costa Graves in Greek in 1969. It's a movie about political decay, corruption, intrigues, and it's based on hard facts. But then a film, after all, is not a documentary. So in spite of being based on hard facts, you can always give it a fictional twist. So that's what Costa Graves did to Z, and that's what Friedkin wanted to do. So follow a documentary approach, but still give a strong storyline and some strong characters, give it that touch of fiction. At the same time, he used or captured a strong street reality, you know, very gritty street scenes captured through handheld camera. That was a sort of the rigor of that period. Gene Hackman plays a hard-boiled cop, Popeye Doyle. Okay, Popeye Doyle, that's his nick. Again, there are no clear-cut heroes or villains. The villain is an aesthete. He is extremely sophisticated. Popeye Doyle, Gene Hackman, is very gritty, very real life like cop, given to baser instincts and all, whereas the villain, the so-called villain, is very polished, very sophisticated. Okay. There is no effort to sentimentalize or romanticize Hackman's character. Okay. He is just shown as a hard-hitting cop, and which is what he is. At the end, he also ends up killing his own partner, an FBI agent, whereas the villain escapes. They manage to get the drugs, they manage to bust the drug deal, but still the frog escapes because he has that kind of evolved and more sophisticated intellect, and he is able to outdo and outsmart all these NYPD cops. So that's the difference, that's the class difference between them, which shows. So at the end he is able to escape and they can't do anything about it. So the villain doesn't get arrested at the end of the movie. Give me some instances. Focus on her. Yeah.
No, the cop villain difference and how they haven't stuck the characterization, and even the idea of the master thief and the thief escaping at the end and all.
Dhoom is a very glamorous movie. Do we agree? Okay, both Dhooms, part 1 and part 2, and of course now we are having the third part as well. So Dhoom happens to be a very stylized, very glamorized version of this subgenre called the cops and criminal kind of cinema. And the fact that invariably a top star plays the role of the master thief, that also says a lot. Dhoom falls not under the category of a gritty, hardcore, hard-hitting movie, but something called, and that's something we will do quite, later on this in this course, called high concept cinema. High concept cinema. And what are the qualities of a high concept cinema? Not exactly freestyle. Stylized cinema. Dhoom, by the way, is inspired by The Saint. Okay, Val Kilmer's Saint, where the master thief is a master of disguises. Yeah, so Saint is also a comic book character, and later on it was a TV series. Yeah, and then almost like Ocean series. Oceans also began. It was during the 60s and the early 70s. It was a very successful TV series. Yeah, you don't know that? Yeah, Oceans was a TV series during the earlier decades, and then we had George Clooney and Brad Pitt and Matt Damon, all of them coming together and making. It's a very good example of high concept cinema. Now I am giving you two instances, one from our own background, from our own scene, Dhoom, and one from the Hollywood scenario, Ocean series, Clooney, Brad Pitt, etc. Okay, and this is a good example of high concept cinema. So now give me what do you understand by high concept cinema? Louder, louder.
Stylized crime or a robbery.
Not necessarily robbery.
Okay.
No,
Pre-planned, very thought of, and
yeah.
experts coming together as a team.
And so not necessarily about robbery or heist. It's not a heist movie. High concept cinema is where the look of the movie is planned before. High concept cinema is where the stars are signed before. Okay, and then the actual shooting begins. That we are going to spend unlimited amount of money on this particular movie, just get us all the stars together and the story will revolve around these stars. So get Hrithik Roshan and Amir Khan and John Abraham, story will come later. That's the way we many producers in India make movies. Now abroad, this concept of having sequels and franchises, don't you think that's also one way of another category of high concept cinema? Mission Impossible, you need to have a mega star like Tom Cruise and then publicize, look, Tom Cruise is going up Burj Khalifa. So that's it. So there are set pieces, there are episodes which are breathtaking. Okay, so that's high concept cinema, not necessarily heist or robberies movie, that is Reservoir Dogs and um, you know, Bob La Flambeur, which Jean Melville did it. It was one of the earliest heist movies. Oceans is a heist movies, but Oceans' idea is to bring together all these stars together, shoot in exotic locations, okay, give them exotic leading ladies, okay. So everything, you know, so you're starting with a blockbuster, you're planning a blockbuster, you're not looking at art. High concept is purely commerce. Cleopatra must have been a high concept movie for those days. Okay, they were definitely not making it for artistic satisfaction. It was look Elizabeth Taylor is this Egyptian queen, and cover her in beautiful garments and beautiful jewelry and present her this way to the audience. That's high concept cinema. So star is more important, stardom is more important. So therefore when we think of high concept cinema, we think stardom and crores and millions and billions of money spent on that. Okay, whereas this kind of cinema is pretty different. So Dhoom, to answer your question, is high concept, okay, rather than French Connection kind of movie. Pardon me?
Avengers, is it a high concept movie?
Pretty, you know, it's capitalizing on what? On a formula. Okay, so high concept movies always manipulate a particular formula. XMen, you know, you bring together James McAvoy and all these Michael Fassbinder, okay. Hugh Jackman is in the earlier movie, but I am talking about the sequel. Yeah, X-Men First Class. That's much more glossy, much more lavishly mounted. Don't you agree? Okay, because they have made so much of money in the first series that they want to redo and make more money in the second part. So that's the idea. Hugh Jackman makes a very fleeting appearance in the movie, a cameo in the movie. Okay, so but it's an out and out high concept film. Most of these James Bond movies, they are high concept films. They are capitalizing on what? Stardom, of course, and also on the image of this super successful British spy who is already a brand identity. So play on that. So Dhoom, Dhoom 1, Dhoom 2, Dhoom 3, it's a successful franchise. So let's capitalize on that. Now they are making Krish 1 and Krish 2. Okay, so it's an established brand. So let's capitalize on that. In Hollywood, there are any number of examples. Okay, so definitely all these franchises are examples of high concept cinema. Okay, now Exorcist, based on Blatty's novel, a supernatural thriller, Sympathy for the Devil. Think of all those things. And I quote Friedkin again. He said, a good part of my motivation to do The Exorcist, because I wanted to make a better film than Francis. Who is this Francis? Coppola. And what had Francis done? The Godfather. Okay. So if Francis can achieve super success, then why can't I? So he was like a test stone for that generation of filmmakers. I want to be more successful than Francis. And the French Connection had already made him in many ways more successful than Francis, because he won all the Oscars that year, all the Academy Awards. He was pitted against Peter Bogdanovich's The Last Picture Show, but then Friedkin ended up winning most of the, Gene Hackman won it for the best actor. So, The Exorcist seemed unfilmable. There are certain novels which people declare this cannot be filmed, this cannot be made into a movie. Our Devdas is a very filmy novel. Okay, you read the novel, I have read it's in fact a novella. You start to finish read it, and you can see our great actors. It's like high concept. You feel like, yeah, in one generation Dilip Kumar could have played it, in second generation Amitabh Bachchan could have done this role, and now we have our Shah Rukh Khan and Abhay Deol reprising the roles. Okay, so fitting our social context. So it looks like a high concept novel written for made to order high concept cinema, the beautiful women vying for his affections and whatnot. So everything is there, the raw material is there. Give me some more examples of unfilmable novels.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude.
Yeah, but has it been made into a
They've
movie?
tried to, but it's largely been implemented.
Yeah. Love in the Times of Cholera, it has been made with Javier Bardem. Yeah. So that is not an unfilmable novel. But there is an unfilmable novel called The Unbearable Lightness of Being, which was basically, everyone thought you can't make it into a movie, but later on it was made into a movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, a very young one. Okay. But there are certain novels which look as if they are made to order. For example, Gone with the Wind. The author, Margaret Mitchell, she says, she has gone on record saying that while writing the novel, she had Clark Gable in her mind for Red Butler. Okay. So, The Exorcist was considered unfilmable because of these possession scenes and poltergeists and levitation. I mean, how do you show that on screen, especially for those times when technology was not all that developed. It was also surrounded by controversies. Can anyone tell me what are those controversies?
I think there was poltergeist.
No, I don't think anyone died while filming The Exorcist. But it has some, and this is more serious than people dying, because in our world, fortunately or unfortunately, religion is more important than people's lives. So it has some strong antichrist images, and if you look it up, you will understand what I am talking about. Okay, and it's not a very progressive cinema, let me tell you. We talk about New Hollywood cinema, we talk about A Hard Day's Night, anti-authoritarian, we talk about Bonnie and Clyde and Easy Rider. Exorcist wasn't that kind of, it takes you back to the old established patriarchal way of life, where the absence of father, in other words, leads to all these problems. The little girl played by Linda Blair, she is possessed because you see, she is growing up in a household where there is no father. Mother is a single woman, right? Okay, so what was happening? The reception was that people were just lining outside the theaters. People were dying to watch this movie. What is this all about? The hype was phenomenal, and while watching the movie, people were fainting, collapsing, and breaking into hysteria. And the Catholic Church was besieged with requests about exorcising the demons inside. Everyone believed that they are possessed now, having watched the movie. We will continue with this tomorrow. Thank you very much.